Salutations, purpose seekers, and welcome to Livelihood Practice, where we ask questions and we answer using psychological tools and learning tips in hopes to navigate different life realms while healing and nurturing our own stories. My name's Amy, and I'm a former homeschooler, and I graduated UCLA with a personally designed interdisciplinary major studying psychological development, education systems and pedagogy, sociocultural change, and the communications between these systems. Now, our question today is, how do psychosocial models help us find where you belong in society? I am going to provide a few theories, and they help me a lot try and figure out where I belong, and my hope is they can help you too. So first, to begin, what is society? Society is a group of people that are living together and they create a social structure or community. And society creates these invisible strings that tie us not only to others, but our sense of self and the roles that we have. So I will provide a video below about who the self is and where does that begin. And I often say it begins in the home, creating our own personal identity. But I want to expand beyond that because the home is attached to all these social structures that are systemic. But what is systemic? Many people say, oh, it's systemic, and they're not very clear or precise about what part of the system they're describing. What makes a society systemic is basically the network relationships that are attached to an individual. The system is a process of working together and also forming pieces to make a whole. So I want to put forth this beautiful quote that is by a psychologist saying, "No society can long sustain itself unless its members have learned the sensitivities, motivations, and skills involved in assisting and caring for other human beings." He's basically saying that until we learn how to nurture people's talents and respect people, we won't learn how to come together as a collective whole. You can essentially think of a person being a string, and this string is tied to other strings, and put together it's creating a woven basket. And if the basket is not tightly woven together with humanity, then it is loose and things can fall through and it cannot long sustain itself, and oftentimes those strings get worn out because it's not tightly woven and held together. So I am going to put forward Yuri Brofenbrenner's ecological systems theory because it's very grounding, and he put it forth towards the government saying, look, a person is not who they are based on simply nature and what has been generationally passed down to them, but rather also nurture and the circumstances that affected those generations and still to this day continue to affect people. So here is Yuri Brofenbrenner's ecological systems theory, and at its core there is the self, or the individual, and this individual is, of course, their sex, their age, their health, everything that you can see at a first-hand physical basis and who they are. But attached to this person are those invisible strings, and I'm gonna work my way from in to out because that's how you weave a basket. The next system that's directly surrounding that individual is the microsystem. The microsystem is the direct surrounding influences that are basically the daily routines that a person encounters. And usually this involves the family, the friends, the school peers, the neighborhood, people that they see every day. And then right in between that is the mesosystem, and the mesosystem is the relationships or the quality of the relationships within these environments. So if you go into a work environment, a school environment that are just outside of the home, these relationships outside the home directly influence what occurs inside the home and what's occurring inside the person as well. And so these relationships happen in an exosystem. The exosystem is essentially the environment that influences a person, such as the religious communities, the healthcare services, and the social services that are typically provided to these communities. It truly creates the quality of the relationships. So if you have a more wealthier environment, you typically tend to find there are more supports in those relationships that really influence the microsystem. And contrastingly, you'll find in lower income areas there are less social welfare supports that can truly support the relationships to have better qualities. And I can provide some research below to help kind of see a lens about this. So directly outside of the exosystem is the macrosystem, and the macrosystem are the cultural values and belief systems that people abide by. The macrosystem is truly the customs that people feel are true about society and should be continuing to hold place, or at least believe exist in their society or in their community. All across these different realms, you can see how they intimately interact every day, and they are all tied together. And they all change according to time, which is the chronos system. The chronos system is the environmental changes that occur across time. And so a lot of socio-historical occurrences can actually influence the quality of these relationships. Now, I was really interested in this when I started at UCLA. I was surrounded by all these different sociological theories, and I really tried to understand how could this affect human development. I got into Patricia Greenfield's Culture and Human Development Lab. She has a theory of sociocultural change, and her theory basically puts forth that the sociodemographics, which include the ecology, which is the surrounding environment of living beings, the economy, which is the systems of production and consumption of goods and services, and the sociology, which is the development and the structure and the functioning of these social relations across these different systems. Those three elements, or sociodemographics, basically shift cultural values and the learning environment, which subsequently influences human development. Her theory of sociocultural change is basically a range that goes back and forth depending on the sociodemographics or what's occurring in that society. So I'll start off describing one, which is the Gemeinschaft or collectivistic society. In this ecology or environment, typically it's more rural, it is smaller scale, and there's simple low divisions of labor. These simple low divisions of labor just simply mean that it's the same people working across different levels of the workforce, typically doing multiple jobs at once together rather than at different levels. And then it's typically of lower technology, and also education typically occurs at the home at a very collectivistic level. That's usually what happens. And also there's a lot of internal homogeneity, which just means that there is not a lot of diversity with the ethnicities that are around them. There's a lot of people that look similar to each other and typically are along similar generational ancestry. Additionally, it's relatively self-contained. So a lot of the goods and services and production that's occurring is within the environment, and it's typically the same people seeing each other every day. This eventually affects the economy, reflecting more about subsistence activities or homemaking activities rather than a lot of commerce with other people. And it typically tends to be poor because it's at a smaller scale. Of course, because it's at a smaller scale, we'll see that social relations are oftentimes between families and interdependent, and they're also lifelong, they're less fleeting. Contrasting to a collectivistic society is a Gesellschaft society, or an individualistic society. An individualistic society tends to be more urbanized, it is larger scale, and therefore there's a lot of complex differentiated roles in a hierarchy. So people have various jobs and they're at different levels, and sometimes they don't necessarily work together in groups, but they work at one level and it gets processed to the next level. And so you'll see that there's more high technology in these kinds of societies, and there's more publicized education, typically in a school rather than at the home. There's a lot of internal heterogeneity, which means there's typically a lot of ethnic diversity and mixture of different ethnic backgrounds. In addition, there's also regular contact with the outside world. It's not self-contained, and that lends itself to boost more commerce and more consumption of different kinds of goods. Therefore, it tends to be wealthier, especially since it's more differentiated and it's more populated. Subsequently, you'll see in the social relations that they're more fleeting. They don't tend to be more lifelong because there's people that can change and come in and out, and there's more diversity to meet more people. Strangers tend to be more independent rather than interdependent. One is not better than the other. It's a matter of what kind of lifestyle that you want to choose to live, because these socio-demographics just influence the cultural values that typically tend to be held in these different kinds of societies. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you can see these contrasts truly across even the United States. I find that this is a very helpful theory to see in order to understand what a beautiful mixture that the United States is you'll find there are people, you can say, in rural, middle parts of the United States and the countryside who tend to hold more collectivistic values. They tend to see the same people. There's not as much contact with the outside world. In contrast to this, you can even compare it to metropolises like New York and Los Angeles, where it's just hyper connection with so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of commerces and ways of living, and people with this much diversity in one place kind of don't need to rely on each other, but they have their own separate little groups, and relationships are more fleeting. So you can totally see that there's a major contrast between these two ideas. I found this to be extremely helpful in understanding where you belong at a cultural level and a value system level in society. And subsequently, it provides you tools about understanding whether your story and your circumstances influence who you've become. I found it to be helpful in understanding how you can find an occupation for yourself. So if you think of yourself in this tightly woven basket, hopefully, interacting with your outside world, you can take the skills and perspective that you gained from your background and understand others at a grander level, and how the political and economic system intimately intertwines with the environments people have outside the home and how that comes inside the home. I did some research with Patricia Greenfield and my friend Angel Hay and Genevieve Brown. And in this research, we studied how COVID influenced a change in cultural values and practices within the home. So we did a follow-up study to the larger scale study that Genevieve Brown and Patricia Greenfield did. In the follow-up study, it was about parents and how did parents' expectations change when children were stuck at home with their parents who were also having to do their work. And parents tended to find that taking care of relations more, and they tended to rely on their families more. They tended to be more interdependent on their kin. They started valuing these relationships to be more lifelong, and there was more values of subsistence activities, especially, which also is a cultural value that started to come about more often than people having to go out to get food, or like occasionally they would eat together, but now they were stuck at home, so they were kind of having to eat together. So we basically saw a historical change go in the opposite direction due to hardship here in the United States. And I find this to be very fascinating, that hardship can bring people together. And I think that if we can bring this idea to now post-pandemic days, to realize that, we can keep what it actually helped us have better relationships through the pandemic, and see what cultural values really we hold near and dear to us, it can also help us see where we belong in society and what we like and what we don't like. So we can basically build from this that we're growing and it depends on who you are to have what kind of society you want to live in, and you can choose. It's not that one way is better than another, but that this is just something that can change across time. I think having an understanding about these psychosocial models can give us a sense of grounding in who we are, what circumstances have made us who we are today, how our story made the skills that we hold and want to share with others, and also that we have a sense of belonging in the society we live in. We have a choice in where we want to belong. Society is not choosing for us where we belong. We have that freedom and that will. With this understanding, it can influence our interpretation of how we want to share ourselves and how we want to love others and support others within our society, and how that thread that is you can be tightly wound up in this beautiful basket that supports humanity. Anyways, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear. If you have any other theories that you want to talk about, please leave a comment below and share your story. Do you feel like the theories that I mentioned resonate with you? And did it provide any clarity for where you belong, not only occupationally, but where you even want to live and what kind of people you want to surround yourself by? You have a choice in this. And you also have a choice to subscribe to me if you're interested. Please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, Purpose Seekers.